I was asked about sort of pre-setting up some searches before you even start reviewing. The main one that this comes up with is your priv log. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember back in the day when people used to make them manually, but it's an extremely tedious process. Fortunately, that has gotten a lot easier these days with Relativity because you can export in Excel, and if you've got a live search, you know exactly what your priv log would look like from day to day. So I'm going to set up a basic priv search, show a couple of basic ways to do a priv log because there's different types of priv logs being done these days. People get into categorical priv logs and things like that. That's probably a topic that would require going into more depth, so we'll do that later. Today we'll just cover basic ones. So we go over to the saved search area. Since this is related to searches that I suggest setting up in advance to be ready for production, I'm going to create a search folder called For Production, and I will have the priv log search in there. All right, so when we go there and we click New Search, the first thing we do is we want to find all the documents that are marked for some kind of privilege. So you set the condition whenever you're doing privilege, one of the important things is that you have to make sure to include family. Then you choose your fields, and whatever fields you choose are what your Excel that you export is going to look like. So it's basically going to be your priv log. So we'll choose privilege to identify what kind of privilege it is. We'll choose basic email metadata. And now we save this search, and it's a live dynamic search. So as we go through and review, at the moment there's only 76 documents, but as we go through and review, that number will go up and you'll always know what your priv log will look like. You can add additional fields, comments, anything that you would want to include on your log. And then Relativity has a very easy function where you just come down here and you hit Export to File. And then it just spits out in Excel. And boom, there's your priv log. This is a very basic one where it's one line for each document. What more people have started doing, and what I personally think is a better practice, is you just list the parent documents on here and you include a field showing that it has attachments. So that if you're, declaring 50 emails privileged, your priv log will only be 50 lines long, even if they each have 10 attachments. Once you've got that search set up, the other searches that I like to make is I go, first of all, things that are not in the privilege search. But that are marked responsive. And I like to keep as separate searches, one the basic responsiveness and one bringing in family. This way you can tell if you've got inconsistent coding and broken families, which is a problem surprisingly often when people think they're ready to produce. So from this you can easily make another search to isolate just the broken families if there are any, which people should always do as a last step when they think they're ready to make a production. So with having these three searches set up in advance, you can see what your priv log will look like from day to day, and you can see what you've got lined up to produce. A good point, going back to the priv log. I don't know if these are great examples, but I'm sure you've all seen that sometimes email addresses, it's a whole mess with, brackets and their name and then their email address and maybe their company. And so we've got a tool in Batch Guru, which our own Nikolai developed, to clean that up and have email addresses as just individuals' names, which looks a lot neater for a priv log. And also maybe it's not the other side's business if somebody has like their personal email. So that's just an additional option that you might have us run before creating the priv log. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments. And as I mentioned, this is just an initial, very basic approach to priv logs. Doing a more thorough or categorical priv log, I think, is probably a topic for another day, but this is a good starting point.